Let's be honest, for 20 years there's been a big group of people in the Star Wars fandom that agrees that Anakin Skywalker is kind of a lot. He can be whiny, awkward, and his dialogue at times feels like it was written by someone who maybe hasn't spoken to another human being.
I don't like sand. It's coarse and rough and irritating, and it gets everywhere. Here everything is soft and smooth.
We've turned his most vulnerable moments into punchlines, using them as Exhibit A for why the prequel trilogy failed as protagonist. I recently did a massive Star Wars marathon all the way from episode 1 to 6, including Rogue One. We did think about including the sequels as well, but ended up choosing not to. Going into it, the consensus among some of the group, myself excluded, was that the prequels are okay, but Anakin, he's just a bit whiny. The writing is just bad. But a funny thing happened around episode 2, especially once it finished. Some of my friends started to realize that maybe they'd overhyped this annoyance of Anakin. Even more interesting is they realized that Luke Skywalker, the golden boy of cinema, is maybe just as whiny, if not more so in his early years.
But I was going into Toshi Station to pick up some power converters.
It's the Skywalker DNA. They're big-hearted, impatient, and incredibly loud about their feelings. So this got me thinking, why do we forgive Luke but use this same trait to dismiss Anakin as bad writing? Today I want to talk about something that I've coined the likability trap. We've been conditioned to think that if a protagonist is annoying, arrogant, or awkward, that then the writers must have failed. Obviously this is a blanket statement, this doesn't apply to all antagonists. Yes, there is better writing in cinema than Star Wars. But what if Anakin Skywalker isn't a poorly written hero? What if he's perfectly written, just deeply flawed? Or what if most likely it's a little combination of the both, but it's definitely not as bad as all the prequel haters make it out to be? Disclaimer, we're going to be talking about a bunch of Star Wars stuff, so there'll be a lot of spoilers along the way. Disclaimer 2, I grew up on the prequels. For some reason I always related to Anakin, although I can assure you I've never had thoughts of killing younglings, and was enamored with Naboo and Padme like straight away. So this for me just envelops my childhood and is the trilogy that I feel most connected to, so I am very biased when it comes to these characters. Today we're going to look at the progression of Anakin throughout the prequels. However, I'm not going to focus on how did Anakin turn into Darth Vader. I think there's plenty of fantastic videos about that. This is just about how Anakin deals with being Anakin. We'll start out with his beginnings on Tatooine all the way to the end of Revenge of the Sith, which then marries up into A New Hope. To understand why Anakin becomes the man that he does, we have to look at who he was before we were even introduced to him. And to me, the truth is that young Anakin is a selfless young boy who finds himself thrown into a world of both adventure and turmoil. The first time we meet him in the movies, he's about 9 and he's a slave. In the expanded universe, however, especially in the book The Rise and Fall of Darth Vader, the novelization that came out in 2007, we get a deeper look into his life under initially the Hutts and then Watto. Anakin recalls arriving on Tatooine and in that process seeing another slave that is trying to escape but passes away from a transmitter bomb going off. This is quite an important bit to remember because I think it plays quite a big part in Anakin's motives to do what he does. On top of that, it's just a really traumatic experience, solidifying where he is in life and what his position is in the ranks. Back to Anakin at this time, he isn't just a kid who's good at fixing things. He's a kid who spends his tiny amount of free time looking for ways to help others. He's building a protocol droid, not to sell, but to help his mum. He enters pod races not for the glory, but because he's the only one really with the reflexes to even try. When he meets Qui-Gon Jinn, a complete stranger, Anakin doesn't ask what's in it for me. He sees people in trouble and immediately offers his home and his help. He risks his life in the Bunta Eve Classic to win parts of a ship he'll never fly, for mission he barely understands. And here's where the whiny argument starts to completely fall apart for me. Look at the moment that Anakin chooses to leave. He is 9 and being told that he has to leave behind the person who up until this point has been the only one to care for him. All that to go to an unknown planet with what looks like a bunch of monks who initially don't seem to want him all that much and at times are almost afraid of him. Or at least afraid of what he might symbolize and become. And yes, of course we see glimpses there of Anakin's dreams to become a Jedi, but he's a child. Does he really know what that entails? No. And we see the pain on his face when he realizes that to become what he thinks he wants to become, he has to leave behind his mother. Yet he still decides to go. And on top of that, not only for himself because this is his dream, but as he says he wants to come back to free his mother and free the slaves on Tatooine. A naive idea, sure, but a testament to his character. When we see Luke initially in A New Hope, we get more of a sense that he's ready to leave for a sense of adventure, not for a sense of wanting to make change. Obviously, in the end, he's pushed to that decision by also a traumatic experience, but it's still quite a difference in initial motivation. So, does Anakin throw a tantrum? Does he whine about the unfairness of the universe and not getting his way? No, he makes a heartbreakingly adult decision. He swallows his fear, looks his mother in the eye, and promises to come back and free her. He accepts this chosen one fate with a quiet, almost scary level of obedience to destiny. At age 9, of course, Anakin doesn't know what the chosen one means. He doesn't know the weight of the prophecy or the political machine of the Sith. To him, being the chosen one just means he might finally have the power to stop the people he loves from suffering. He accepts the burden almost without complaint because up until now he spent most of his life as property. Now, if I want to get really philosophical, one could argue that the tragedy of episode 1 isn't that he's too annoying or maybe too lucky in this situation. It's that he's a pure-hearted altruist being handed over to a system, the Jedi, that is going to tell him that his greatest strength, his ability to love and care for individuals, is actually his greatest weakness. I don't think Anakin was born with an ego. He was born with a heart that was too big for the desert. The ego? That comes later when the world starts telling him that he's a god. If phase 1 was about the selfless child, phase 2 is about what I've coined the summer comeback. Think back to being 19. Now imagine you spend your life on a deserted planet somewhere as literal property, but now you've been away at like the most prestigious boarding school that there is in the galaxy for 10 years. You've grown a foot taller, you've mastered the Force, and you're arguably the most talented pilot and duelist in the Jedi Order. You aren't just coming back, you're coming back as the chosen one. This is the moment we all dreamed of in high school, walking back into the lives of the people who knew us then and showing them who we are now. And who's the first person he sees? Padme Amidala, the queen, the literal girl of his dreams, or the angel as he calls her. And here's the absolute kicker. It works. She's interested. She's looking at him not as a little boy, but as a man, although she does put him in his place a lot. For anyone else, that would be a win. For a kid who grew up with nothing, that is a psychological explosion. This is where I think his ego starts to be solidified. It's not bad writing that makes Anakin arrogant and awkward in Attack of the Clones. It's the fact that he's been validated by this person that he's cared about this entire time and looks up to. Combine that with a sense of feeling invalidated by other people he cares about, like the Jedi Council, and you've got the perfect marriage. This, of course, brings us towards the most memed line in all of Star Wars.
I don't like sand.
People call this clunky dialogue, and honestly, sure, it's not Shakespeare. But again, let's look at the context. Anakin is on Naboo. For the first time in his life, he's surrounded by water, lush greenery, and luxury. To us, sand is just a vacation annoyance. To Anakin, sand is the grit in his eyes while he worked for Watto. It's the heat that killed other slaves. It's the physical memory of his mother's suffering. Water was a luxury on Tatooine. It was said to be more valuable than gold. And when he compares the roughness of sand to the softness of Padme and Naboo, he's not just being a bad poet. He's experiencing sensory overload. He's rejecting his past and desperately trying to cling on to this new civilized life that he's earned, while at the same time being plagued by dreams and visions of the situation his mother is still currently actively in. So much in his life is actually starting to come together, but still not in a way that allows him to go back to Tatooine and free the people he loves. An internal failure is actively competing with all of this external affirmation from the girl of his dreams. I think this is where the whining starts to come in. When he complains that Obi-Wan is holding him back, he sounds like a bratty teenager because, well, he is one. I mean, look at when he says,
In some ways, a lot of ways, I'm really ahead of him.
This is peak brat, but it is deeper than that. He's been told he's a god by the prophecy. He's held as his precious asset by the council, while at the same time being treated at times like a child. Of course, that is because he's partially still one, but in his head, he has an inflated sense of self. That being said, I can make a whole segment of this video just about how I feel that various members of the council, specifically Mace Windu and Yoda, fail Anakin completely when it comes to accepting him in the council and really talking about his feelings. Back to Anakin in Attack of the Clones though. He's trying to impress a senator while being told he's not allowed to have feelings. He's whining because he's caught in the middle of like an impossible identity crisis. The Jedi tell him he's a servant, his ego is telling him he's king, and his heart is telling him that in the end he's still just a scared kid on Tatooine afraid of losing his mum and those that he loves. We find him annoying in this movie because he's trying too hard. He's trying to be the hero, the alpha, the lover, all at once. We see Padme actively putting him back in his place, as she should.
Sorry, milady.
And so his behavior is awkward, it's cringeworthy, and you know what? It's deeply, painfully human. Again, let's remember, this is a 19-year-old boy. How many 19-year-olds do you know that if they've been told for the last 10 years that they're the chosen one, wouldn't have an inflated ego? yet at the same time have an incredible lack of social skills. Now, if you watch only the movies, it might feel like Anakin goes from like a moody teenager to this dark, brooding adult overnight between Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith. But there is a 3-year gap where Anakin Skywalker becomes kind of like a legend, and I think that this is the bridge the prequels maybe kind of needed. In the Clone Wars, we see more moments of the good friend and hero without fear that Obi-Wan and Luke talked about in the original trilogy. But more importantly, I think we see the moment his ego, that summerback confidence, runs headfirst into the meat grinder of reality. The Jedi Council kind of threw Annie what he would have seen as a curveball. They gave the Chosen One a student. They gave him Ahsoka Tano. Suddenly Anakin isn't just responsible for himself, he has to be a role model, and this matures him faster than any lightsaber duel ever could. He goes from whining about his own problems to having to be a protector for someone else. That being said, I think the war also starts to rot his faith in the system. He sees the Jedi becoming politicians and soldiers instead of the keepers of peace. He sees his own student Ahsoka framed by the Order and cast out. Not only that, he manages to kind of fix the situation and restore her honor, but she chooses to leave anyway, which I think solidifies his fear of losing Padme.
I'm sorry, Master, but I'm not coming back.
And then, of course, we have to talk about the Mortis arc in the Clone Wars. You could call it the ultimate Chosen One checkup or performance review. While the show famously wipes Anakin's memories of the visions he sees of himself becoming Darth Vader, he remembers being there. On Mortis, Anakin is forced to confront the father, the daughter, and the son, beings who represent the cosmic balance of the Force. This isn't just a side quest, it's literally a performance review for the Chosen One. And on top of that, Anakin passes. He tames both the light and the dark simultaneously to save his friends. It's also here that he sees Qui-Gon Jinn again, and while Obi-Wan sees Qui-Gon as a mentor, I think Anakin sees him as the first person who ever truly believed in him without an agenda. Qui-Gon tells him, "You've brought balance to this place. Stay on this path and you will do it for the galaxy." This could add fuel to the fire that is the ego of Anakin. If a ghost god version of maybe a potential father figure tells you that you're doing a great job, there's a chance you might walk into Revenge of the Sith thinking you're untouchable. But it's a double-edged sword. Mortis leaves Anakin with a lingering, subconscious sense of dread. He knows he's the key to the universe, but he can tell that the universe is also pulling him apart. When he gets back to the real world, the petty rules of the Jedi Council don't just feel annoying anymore. They feel like an insult to this cosmic destiny. So, when we transition into Revenge of the Sith, Anakin is carrying the weight of Mortis and the trauma of war. He's not whining about a promotion because he's a brat. He's frustrated because he literally held the balance of the universe in his hands, yet Mace Windu still won't let him into the restricted area of the library. At the same time of all of that, he's a legendary general, he's now a husband and a father-to-be. And I think that this is where the likability trap gets truly complex. If you only look at the movies, his fall might feel like a tantrum, but if you look at the man who's just spent 3 years in the trenches of the Clone Wars, it could look like the beginnings of a slight nervous breakdown. Think about what he's carrying. He's the man who held the balance of the Force in his bare hands on Mortis. He's the man who watched his student Ahsoka walk away because the Jedi Council failed her. He's been the Republic's poster boy for a war that has cost him everything. I think that his ego has evolved from a desire for attainment to a desperate need for control. After losing his mother in a traumatic moment, he now also has visions of Padme dying during childbirth. And I think this turns his Chosen One status into more of like a psychological cage for him. He thinks, I'm the most powerful Jedi ever in existence, I have the highest midichlorian count ever recorded, I've tamed the gods of Mortis, why can't I stop death? And this leads us to the infamous, "It's outrageous, it's unfair" line.
This is outrageous. It's unfair. How can you be on the council and not be a master?
For years, people have used this line as proof that he was still just a whiny kid. But again, let's look at the context we've built. He's given his entire youth to a system that's starting to use him as a weapon. I mean, we can look at that they want him to spy on Palpatine, the person that currently he's starting to trust more and more. And at the same time, the council's refusing to trust him as a leader. He isn't complaining about a promotion. He's realizing that the Jedi Order are never going to give him the resources that he thinks he needs to save the person he loves most. He opens up to Yoda, yet in my opinion, Yoda refuses to acknowledge the reality of the situation. He responds to Anakin with his riddles, which are beautifully written but don't help Anakin resolve his feelings. There are multiple failures that we see happening throughout Revenge of the Sith, and I think that this is one of them, alongside Windu refusing to bring Anakin with him when he goes to arrest Palpatine. And this is the tragedy of Anakin's maturation. He didn't just turn evil, he buckled under the weight that no human really was ever meant to carry. He was told he was a god for 13 years, then treated like a dangerous child the moment he showed human emotion. When he finally marches on the temple, I don't think it's because the writing is bad or he's annoying. It's because his ego, the one that exploded on Naboo when he got the girl, has finally convinced him that he's the only person in the galaxy capable of making things right. And this of course leads us to our final breakdown, the Mustafa duel. People sometimes laugh at his line,
From my point of view, the Jedi are evil.
but again, let's look at everything we've tracked so far. The selfless kid from the desert, to the teenager who finally felt seen on Naboo, to the war hero who was told by Gods of Mortis that he's the key to everything. From his point of view, the Jedi didn't just fail him. They try to suppress the power that he thinks he needs to save his wife. Yes, the irony here is not lost on me that at the same time he's force choking the life out of her, but it shows us again that at this point, Anakin has completely lost the plot. Not that the plot has lost itself. And so in this moment, Anakin isn't whining to his master. He's delusional. He's a man who's been told he's the center of the universe for so long and told to repress his emotions that he's forgotten he actually is just a human being. And part of being human are death and loss. And lest we forget, he's been completely groomed and brainwashed by a Sith Lord who told him he can save Padme from death. I think that this bad writing isn't the dialogue, it's the uncomfortable reality of watching a hero fail. We want our heroes to be stoic like Obi-Wan, but Anakin is a mirror of our own worst impulses, our pride, our desperate attachments, and our refusal to let go of the things we love, even when they're already turning to sand. Now I know what you're thinking at this point. We like flawed heroes. We love characters with baggage. And while that is true, we usually like our flaws to be cool. We want our heroes to be haunted, rugged, or stoic. We can look at heroes like Batman, Iron Man, at times James Bond, and even someone like Han Solo. He's flawed, but more in the way that's cool and arrogant and makes him kind of the bad boy of the franchise. Not the hero who's annoying and trying to flirt with someone who's kind of out of his league and constantly feels like he deserves more from the people around him, whether justified or not. What we aren't used to and what makes us uncomfortable is watching a hero whose flaws are annoying. We aren't used to watching a socially stunted, sexually frustrated teenager wield the power of a god while experiencing a massive ego trip. It's not a cinematic flaw, it's a painfully realistic one. We call it bad writing because it's cringeworthy to watch Anakin try to navigate a romance with a senator when he has the social skills of a monk and the ego of a literal prophecy. But that's exactly why I think his arc works. If he was a smooth-talking, composed badass from day one, his fall wouldn't feel like a tragedy. It would just be a plot point. Instead, we see the mess. We see the guy who got the girl and immediately didn't know what to do with the pressure of keeping her. We see the guy who got told he's the chosen one and started to believe the hype. Alongside that, we see a guy who's being groomed by someone who's actively tapping into these insecurities that the Jedi Council's refusing to talk to him about and is telling him to repress. It's easy to root for a hero who is perfect. It's even easier, I think, to root for a hero who's broken in a cool way. It's much harder to look at Anakin Skywalker in all his awkward, arrogant, frustrated glory, and to realize that his journey is one of the most human ones in the galaxy. Combine this narrative and this trope with a script that maybe could have gone through another rewrite or two in certain moments, and you get a bunch of people commenting on videos with hate. So I'm definitely not trying to invalidate people who are saying, you know what, there are parts of the script here that just are flawed and don't work really well. But I think there's a percentage of those people who miss the fact that Anakin just is annoying. At the end of the day, my friends realize that Anakin isn't this poorly written character that everyone makes him out to be. He's just a character who maybe refuses to let us feel comfortable. And maybe that's the highest praise you can give a script, while again acknowledging that there are parts of it that maybe aren't the best. So what do you think? Have I completely missed the mark with this, or are there aspects of what I've said that you agree with? Do you want to see more of these deep dives into Star Wars or specific characters, or are there other characters and franchises that you'd like me to take a look at? Either way, let me know in the comments below. I'll see you in the next dimension.